She tried not to stare. Everything she had ever been taught, every warning from her superiors, every fear that had kept her alive for months, screamed at her to look away, but she couldn't. The sight of the British soldiers, clad in their muddy uniforms, brought a strange mix of dread and curiosity. As they approached her makeshift camp, Anneliese Müller felt her heart pound in her chest, a chaotic rhythm that mirrored the turmoil in her mind. The air was thick with a chill that seeped into her bones, a biting reminder that spring was slow to arrive in this desolate corner of war-torn Europe. The camp, surrounded by barbed wire and watchtowers, was a dismal place where despair hung like the heavy clouds above. Anneliese, just 24 years old, had spent the last several months in this limbo, a prisoner of war, stripped of her identity and forced to confront the consequences of a conflict she had only known through the lens of propaganda. As she stood among the other women in the camp, the confusion in her heart battled against the deep-seated beliefs instilled in her since childhood. The stories of the British soldiers as merciless monsters echoed in her mind. They will show no mercy, her instructors had warned. They are the enemy. Yet here they were, mere human beings, trudging through the mud towards her, their expressions a mix of weariness and something else. Was it sympathy? This moment would redefine her entire world. Before we uncover why, let us know in the comments where you are watching from. It's amazing to see how far these stories travel. Now, back to 1945. The camp was a grim reflection of the war's toll, a place where hope seemed as scarce as food. The barracks were nothing more than tattered tents, plagued by the cold winds that cut through the fabric, leaving the prisoners vulnerable to the elements. Anneliese remembered the last time she had felt warmth, the sun on her skin before the war had consumed her life. Now, she was merely a shadow of the woman she once was, her body frail, her spirit dimmed by the relentless fear and uncertainty that surrounded her. Before the war, Anneliese had been a product of her environment, raised in a household steeped in Nazi ideology. She had grown up believing in the superiority of her country and the inherent evil of anyone who opposed it. The propaganda had painted a vivid picture of the Allies as heartless foes, intent on destroying everything she held dear. Yet here she was, a prisoner among those very soldiers, grappling with the reality that did not fit the narrative she had been taught. Rumors had begun to spread among the prisoners about the British soldiers, who were less hostile than expected. Whispers of soldiers sharing rations, of laughter echoing through the camp, reached her ears. Anneliese found herself torn between the ingrained fear of the enemy and a burgeoning curiosity about the humanity that might lie beneath their uniforms. What did they think of her, of them? The uncertainty gnawed at her, a constant reminder that the enemy was no longer an abstract concept, but a tangible reality, living and breathing before her eyes. As she watched the soldiers draw closer, she felt a twinge of shame. It was a feeling she had not anticipated, the weight of it pressing down on her chest. She was supposed to despise them, to see them as the embodiment of all that was wrong in the world. But as she locked eyes with one soldier, a tall man with a kind expression, she found herself captivated by the depth of his gaze. It was as if he could see through the layers of fear and hate that surrounded her, peeling back the facade she had worn for so long. Anneliese felt the heat rise to her cheeks, a flush of vulnerability that she had not experienced in months. She wanted to look away, to retreat into the safety of her beliefs, but she couldn't. Instead, she stood frozen, caught in a moment of indecision that felt both terrifying and liberating. What did it mean to confront the embodiment of her fears? To see them as flesh and blood, with hopes and dreams just like hers? The tension in the air was palpable, a thick layer of expectation that hung between them. She could feel the eyes of her fellow prisoners on her, their own fears reflected in the uncertainty of this encounter. Anneliese's heart raced as she faced the reality of her situation. Was she truly prepared to redefine everything she had ever known? As the soldiers drew nearer, she felt the weight of her upbringing crash against the tide of her growing understanding. Everything she had once believed was being called into question by the simplest act of human connection. In that moment, she understood that the path ahead was fraught with complexity, filled with the possibility of empathy and the profound discomfort of confronting the self. As the soldiers continued their approach, each step echoed in her mind, a reminder that this encounter would not only challenge her beliefs, but also the very essence of who she was. Anneliese stood at the precipice of transformation, caught between the fear of the unknown and the desperate need for understanding in a world torn apart by war. The soldiers' faces were a blend of exhaustion and determination, and she found herself searching for signs of the monsters she had been led to believe they were. But all she saw were human beings, their expressions revealing fragments of vulnerability that mirrored her own. In that moment of connection, Annalisa realized that she was not just a prisoner. She was a woman grappling with the complexities of humanity in the midst of conflict. In the cold, unforgiving landscape of a British POW camp, the boundaries between enemy and ally seemed to blur, leaving Annalisa with a burning question. Could she reconcile the other with the truth of their shared humanity? The answer lay just beyond her grasp, waiting to be uncovered in the most unexpected of places. The tension in the air was palpable as Annalisa caught snippets of laughter amongst the soldiers, mixing with the distant sounds of the camp, metal clanging against metal, the low murmur of voices and the occasional bark of orders. She shifted her gaze, tracing the outlines of the figures moving about, trying to discern the monsters from the ordinary men beneath their uniforms. The propaganda that filled her childhood had painted them as ruthless brutes, devoid of compassion, yet here they were, appearing more human than she had ever imagined. Annalisa's mind drifted back to her childhood in Munich, where the Nazi ideology had seeped into every aspect of life. She had been taught to view the British as the enemy, the embodiment of evil, a stark contrast to the glory of a pure Germany. She remembered the fervor in her teachers' voices, the way they vilified the Allies, instilling fear and hatred deep within her. Her mother often whispered about the dangers lurking beyond their borders, while her father, a soldier himself, shared tales of heroism, reinforcing the image of the noble German spirit fighting against the monstrous foes. Yet standing there, in the cold, muddy confines of the prison camp, Annalisa felt a dissonance creeping into her thoughts. The soldiers she saw before her were not the fearsome creatures she had been led to believe existed. Instead, they appeared tired, worn from the weight of war. Much like her, the thin lines beneath their eyes told stories of sleepless nights and burdens too heavy to bear. Rumors began to circulate among the prisoners as the days passed. Some spoke of a change in the guards' demeanor. "They're just men like us now," one whispered, her voice barely above a breath. "I heard they're more relaxed since the war is ending." Another prisoner nodded in agreement, a flicker of hope igniting in her eyes. Maybe they're not so bad after all. Annalisa wrestled with the implications of these words. Could it be true? Could the soldiers she had been taught to despise have softened? She watched from a distance as a group of soldiers shared a laugh, their camaraderie palpable. It stirred something within her, a yearning for connection that had long been suppressed by fear and prejudice. Yet every time she dared to entertain the thought, the harsh voice of Sergeant Peter Blackwood echoed in her mind, reminding her of the danger of letting her guard down. He was a figure who exemplified the animosity she had been conditioned to accept. His scornful remarks and suspicious glances towards the prisoners were a constant reminder that not all soldiers were kind. One evening, as Annalisa sat on the cold ground, her stomach growling in protest, she observed a soldier separate from the rest. He was James Thompson, a man she had seen before but had never truly looked at. He seemed different, offering small bits of bread to a few starving prisoners, his actions quiet and unassuming. The warmth in his smile contrasted sharply with the chill of the camp, and for the first time, Annalisa felt a flicker of hope. What would you do if faced with the unexpected? She pondered silently, grappling with her own prejudices. This question hung heavily in her mind. Could she dare to approach him, to break the invisible barrier of animosity? Or was it safer to cling to the beliefs that had shaped her entire existence? Days turned into weeks, and the internal conflict brewed within her. Annalisa often found herself staring into the distance, her thoughts drifting towards the soldiers, their laughter echoing in her mind. Yet each time she caught sight of Sergeant Blackwood, the fear returned. He embodied the very essence of her upbringing, a reminder of the strictures that had bound her thoughts. How could she reconcile this newfound curiosity with the teachings that had shaped her? One fateful afternoon, Annalisa fell ill with a fever that left her weak and disoriented. Her body ached, and the cold ground felt like it was swallowing her whole. As she lay there, the sounds of the camp faded, and she succumbed to the darkness creeping at the edges of her vision. When she finally reopened her eyes, she was startled to find James Thompson kneeling beside her, Concern etched across his face. Hey, stay with me," he urged softly, his voice a gentle anchor in her swirling thoughts. "You're going to be all right." The warmth of his hand on her forehead was surprising, an unexpected kindness that sent shockwaves through her. She had prepared herself for hostility, for the coldness she had been taught to expect. But here he was, offering care instead. This couldn't be right. These were the monsters, weren't they? Her mind raced as she fought against the newfound reality before her. James produced a small piece of bread from his pack, breaking it in half and offering her the larger portion. "You need to eat," he insisted, his eyes earnest. "Please." The dissonance within her intensified as she accepted the bread, her hands trembling slightly. Every morsel tasted of compassion, a stark contrast to the bitterness she had been fed her entire life. In that moment, she saw beyond the uniform, recognizing the humanity that resided within. Annalise's heart raced as she struggled to comprehend the implications of this encounter. The soldier before her was not the demon she had been taught to fear, but a man capable of kindness, a being who understood suffering. She felt a wave of shame wash over her, a crushing awareness of how deeply ingrained her beliefs had been. As she chewed slowly, she noticed the way James looked at her, not with disdain or superiority, but with empathy. The walls she had built around herself began to crumble as she grappled with the weight of her realization. Annalise wanted to ask him why he would help someone like her. But the words caught in her throat, tangled with the fear of what such a question might reveal about her own vulnerability. "Are you all right?" he asked gently, breaking through her reverie. His voice was a lifeline, pulling her back into the moment. I don't know," she managed to reply, her voice barely a whisper. The admission felt like a confession, exposing the cracks in her facade. James offered a reassuring smile. "Just take it one day at a time." His words echoed in her mind, a mantra that began to reshape her understanding of the world around her. As the darkness of her illness began to lift, so too did the veil of prejudice that had clouded her vision. And then, in the midst of this unexpected kindness, a thought occurred to her. She wasn't just a prisoner. She was a human being deserving of compassion, just as he was. If you find yourself captivated by Annalise's journey, her transformation through this unexpected connection, then take a moment to share your thoughts with us. Where are you watching from? It's remarkable to see how these stories resonate across the globe. We'd love to hear your insights in the comments below. As the days continued to unfold, Annalise could feel the world shifting around her. The laughter of the soldiers no longer seemed like a mocking echo, but rather a reminder of the humanity that existed beyond the confines of their uniforms. This realization was profound and terrifying, yet it filled her with an unexpected sense of hope. James's kindness had ignited a spark within her, one that challenged everything she had known. If she could see him as a person, could she also see the others in the same light? Stories like this remind us that behind the uniforms, the flags, and the ideologies, there are always human beings. They remind us that our capacity for empathy is the most powerful weapon against hatred. If you believe that these forgotten histories need to be told, that we must learn from them to build a better future, then join our community of history lovers by subscribing to the channel. Help us continue to bring these vital stories out of the shadows. Thank you for watching. She felt a wave of heat wash over her as the soldiers drew nearer, their laughter echoing in the cold air, juxtaposed sharply against the somber reality of her surroundings. Annalise's heart raced, each beat a reminder of the tension that had gripped her ever since her capture. The war had stripped her of so much, yet here she was, facing the embodiment of everything she had been taught to fear. The soldiers wore their uniforms with a casualness that unnerved her, as if they were merely on a day out, rather than standing guard over a camp filled with prisoners. As she stood there, her body frozen in place, Annalise's mind spiraled through the memories of her upbringing, the propaganda-filled speeches, the fervent chants of nationalism, the demonization of the enemy. It was all supposed to prepare her for this, to make her see only monsters where human beings stood. But the closer they got, the more those teachings began to fray at the edges. "Look at them," she thought bitterly. "They're just men." The thought felt treacherous, a betrayal of everything she had been conditioned to believe. One soldier, taller than the rest, caught her eye, James Thompson. His face was marked by a kindness that seemed out of place in this grim reality. He laughed easily, his eyes crinkling at the corners. and Annalisa felt an inexplicable pull towards him, a flicker of curiosity mingling with her fear. She quickly averted her gaze, focusing on the ground beneath her feet. The cold earth, a stark reminder of her predicament. As the soldiers passed by, one of them, a stocky man with a deep voice, spoke up. "How you lot look worse than the rats we've been catching," he jeered, eliciting laughter from the others. Annalisa flinched at the words, the sharpness of them cutting through her already fragile composure. The laughter felt alien to her, a sound that belonged to a world she no longer understood. Days turned to weeks as Annalisa remained in the camp, her initial apprehension slowly evolving into a tense curiosity. She observed the soldiers from a distance, noting the small acts of kindness that punctuated their days, sharing rations, offering water, even exchanging smiles with the children of other prisoners. It was maddening. Each act chipped away at the fortress of hatred and fear she had built within herself. Then came the day that would change everything. Annalisa fell ill, a fever rendering her weak and disoriented. She lay in the corner of her tent, shivering despite the warmth of the sun filtering through the cracks in the canvas. The world around her blurred, and the sounds of the camp faded into an indistinct murmur. When she awoke, it was to the sight of James kneeling beside her, a worried frown etched across his brow. "You need to eat something," he said softly, his voice a soothing balm against her agitation. In his hands he held a small piece of bread, the crust golden and crisp against the dull backdrop of her surroundings. Annalisa's first instinct was to recoil, to push him away. "Why? You don't have to do this," she croaked, her voice barely more than a whisper. James's brow furrowed deeper and he shook his head. "Everyone deserves a chance to feel better. Just eat. I won't force you." His sincerity struck her like a physical blow. She hesitated, her mind racing with the implications of accepting his kindness. What would it mean? It felt like surrendering to the very enemy she had been taught to despise. But the gnawing hunger in her belly, combined with the warmth radiating from his presence, compelled her to reach out. As she took the bread, their fingers brushed, and a jolt of electricity coursed through her, a revelation that shattered the barriers she had built. The moment felt monumental. It was a bridge across a chasm of misunderstandings and prejudice. James watched her eat, his expression a mixture of concern and encouragement. "You'll be all right," he said, his tone gentle. "Just take it slow." She glanced at him, really looked at him. Here was a man, not a monster, a soldier, yes, but one who showed compassion even in the face of adversity. "You're not like them," she thought, her heart thundering in her chest. "You're human." A sudden surge of emotion overwhelmed her as she recalled the images she had been fed all her life. Those faces twisted in hatred, the caricatures of the British soldier as a heartless killer. This couldn't be right, she thought, panic rising in her throat. These were the monsters, weren't they? Yet as she chewed slowly, Annalisa found herself utterly lost in the kindness of this man. The taste of the bread was rich and warm, but it was the act of sharing that enveloped her in something far more nourishing. The walls she had so carefully constructed began to crumble, brick by brick, revealing the vulnerability beneath. But just as she began to embrace this newfound realization, the tension in the camp escalated. Sergeant Blackwood, the cynical guard who often walked the perimeter, stormed in, his presence suffocating the air. "Thompson," he barked, his voice a growl of authority. "What are you doing here? You're not supposed to be wasting rations on these prisoners." James's expression faltered, his kindness replaced by a flicker of fear. "She's sick, Sargento. She needs help," he replied, standing his ground. Blackwood's eyes narrowed and Annalisa felt the weight of his scrutiny, a predatory gaze that stripped her bare. "Help? You think these vermin deserve help?" He spat the words laced with venom, and Annalisa felt her heart drop, a cold dread settling in her stomach. The tension was palpable, an electric charge that threatened to ignite. Annalisa's breath caught in her throat, the fear of reprisal swirling through her mind. Would James be punished for his kindness? Would she be the cause of yet another act of cruelty? "Enough!" James's voice rang out, stronger than she had ever heard it. "She's a human being, Sargento, just like us." The words hung in the air, a defiance that stirred something deep within Annalisa. The standoff felt eternal, each second stretching into infinity, as Blackwood glared at James, an unyielding storm brewing behind his eyes. Annalisa held her breath, her heart racing as she waited for the inevitable fallout. But instead of violence, a moment of clarity passed between the two men. a silent understanding that shifted the balance, if only slightly. "You'll regret this," Blackwood finally spat, turning on his heel and stalking away. Annalisa felt the tension dissipate, but the fear lingered, a ghost that refused to leave her side. James turned back to her, his expression softening. "Are you all right?" he asked, concern etched in every line of his face. Annalisa nodded, though she felt anything but fine. I didn't want you to get in trouble," she whispered, her voice trembling. James knelt beside her, his gaze unwavering. "It's worth it. You're worth it." In that moment, Annalisa felt a profound shift within herself. The walls of hatred that had once enveloped her began to crack, and for the first time, she saw the true cost of the war, not just in bodies and battles, but in the humanity that was lost on both sides. As she looked into James's eyes, she understood that the true monsters were not the soldiers in front of her, but the ideologies that had twisted their hearts and minds. This wasn't just about her, it was about all of them. Young men caught in a war that sought to divide and destroy. Leaving the tent, Annalisa felt the weight of her past pressing down on her. She had believed she was fighting for something noble, but now the truth clawed at her insides. She turned to watch James interact with the other soldiers, his laughter mingling with the shouts and cries of the camp, and she felt a strange warmth blooming in her chest. This wasn't the end, it was a beginning. As days turned into weeks, Annalisa found herself drawn to the soldiers more and more, her heart battling with her mind. Each act of kindness chipped away at her ingrained beliefs, and she began to understand the truth of her situation. The enemy was not a faceless entity, but a collection of individuals, each with their struggles and dreams. James became her anchor, a reminder that humanity could exist even in the darkest of times. With each passing day, as she watched him share his rations, smile at the children, and engage in small acts of rebellion against the cruelty of Blackwood, Annalisa felt her own heart shift. But the realities of war were unforgiving, and she knew she would have to confront her past, her beliefs, and ultimately her own shame. And as the sun set over the camp, casting long shadows against the barbed wire, she felt a stirring within her, a promise that she would not let this moment fade into the darkness. Annalisa would embrace the truth, no matter the cost. The days following the unexpected kindness of James Thompson unfolded like a delicate tapestry, each moment weaving a new thread of understanding and reflection into Annalisa's life. The initial shock of his compassion lingered in her mind like a haunting melody, playing over and over, and with each repetition, she felt the weight of her past beliefs crumble just a little more. Annalisa, now more aware of her surroundings, began to observe the British soldiers with a new lens, one that had been fogged by the serum of propaganda she had long consumed. The once fearsome figures now appeared as complex individuals, each with their own stories etched into the tired lines of their faces. She noticed how they shared scarce rations, laughed with one another, and sometimes even whispered kind words to the prisoners. With every act of humanity, Annalisa's heart softened and the barriers she had built around her soul started to crack. One chilly morning, she sat on the cold ground wrapped in her thin coat, contemplating her transformation. The horizon was just beginning to blush with the first light of dawn, and a sense of hope fluttered in her chest. She recalled how, when she first arrived at the camp, she had felt nothing but resentment towards her captors. Yet now she found herself yearning for connection, to learn more about those she had been taught to hate. Driven by a mixture of curiosity and the budding warmth of empathy, Annalisa approached James during one of the rare moments when he was not on duty. He was sitting against a wooden crate, a small notebook resting on his lap. As she neared, he glanced up, surprise flashing across his features before it melted into a welcoming smile. "Good morning, Annalise," he greeted, his voice warm and steady. "How are you feeling today?" "Better," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Each word felt like a step towards a bridge she had previously thought uncrossable. "Thank you for what you did. It meant a lot." James nodded, his expression thoughtful. "We're all human, aren't we? It's easy to forget that in times like these." He gestured to the notebook. "I've been trying to write down my thoughts, to make sense of all this. Would you like to read it?" Annalisa hesitated. The idea of reading the words of the enemy, or rather, the person she had deemed an enemy, was daunting. Yet the invitation stirred something within her. She nodded, and he handed her the notebook, their fingers brushing lightly. As she read, Annalisa found herself immersed in James's world. His fears, his dreams, and his longing for peace mirrored her own, regardless of the uniforms they wore. He wrote about the families he missed, the friends he had lost, and the hope that one day they would all return home. Each page was a revelation, drawing her closer to understanding not just him, but the broader human experience that transcended nationality. Days turned into weeks, and Annalisa's interactions with James deepened. They began to share stories of their lives before the war, illuminating their differences yet revealing their remarkable similarities. She spoke of her childhood in Germany, filled with laughter and joy, but also of the shadows of fear that loomed over her as the Nazi regime twisted her upbringing. James, in turn, shared tales of his family in England, of sunlit summers and the warmth of a loving home. With each conversation, the layers of Annalisa's internal conflict began to peel away. The shame she had felt for her past beliefs morphed into a powerful motivator for change. She no longer wanted to be a product of her upbringing. She yearned to redefine herself in the light of newfound understanding. One fateful evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Annalisa found herself sitting beside James once more. They were both silent for a moment, simply taking in the beauty of the fading day. Then, gathering her courage, Annalisa turned to him, her voice trembling slightly. "Do you think we can ever forgive ourselves for what we've done?" James regarded her with a serious expression, his brow furrowing slightly. "Forgiveness is a difficult thing. It requires acknowledging our mistakes, but also understanding that we are always capable of change. It's a journey, not a destination." Annalisa nodded, feeling the weight of his words sink deep within her. She had been so consumed by the war, by the hatred that had been instilled in her, that she had forgotten the power of compassion and understanding. In that moment, she resolved to embrace her journey, to share what she had learned with others. She would not let the shadows of her past define her future. Instead, she would carry the light of empathy forward, illuminating the path for others who might still be ensnared by the chains of prejudice. As the war finally drew to a close, Annalisa found herself standing at a crossroads. The camp would soon be disbanded, and she would be released back into a world that had been irrevocably altered. The thought of stepping into this new reality filled her with both fear and anticipation. However, she felt a sense of purpose blooming within her, a determination to spread the message of humanity that had blossomed during her time in captivity. In the months that followed, Annalisa returned to Germany, carrying with her not just the memories of her time as a POW, but also the lessons learned through compassion. She began to share her story with others, speaking about the kindness of the British soldiers, particularly James, who had shown her that humanity could exist even in the darkest of times. Through her efforts, she helped foster dialogue between former enemies, encouraging them to share their experiences and find common ground. Annalisa became a voice for peace, advocating for understanding over hatred, and slowly but surely, she began to see the impact of her work ripple throughout her community. As she stood before an audience one evening, sharing her message of empathy, she felt a sense of fulfillment wash over her. The journey had not been easy, but it had been necessary. The shame she once felt had transformed into a powerful drive to make a difference. Stories like mine remind us that behind the uniforms, the flags, and the ideologies, there are always human beings, Annalisa said, her voice steady and passionate. We must learn to look beyond the surface, to see the light in each other, for that is our greatest weapon against hatred. As she concluded her speech, the room erupted in applause. Annalisa felt a wave of emotion wash over her, a profound connection to those who had gathered to hear her story. In that moment, she knew that she was not just a prisoner of war, but a beacon of hope, a living testament to the power of understanding and forgiveness. As the applause faded, she looked directly at the camera, her eyes glistening. If you believe that these forgotten histories need to be told, that we must learn from them to build a better future, then join our community of history lovers by subscribing to this channel. Help us continue to bring these vital stories out of the shadows. Thank you for watching. With that, Annalisa smiled, embracing the future with open arms, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, armed with the knowledge that empathy can reshape the world.